In 1886, a small survey team from Knoxville pushed deep into the Appalachian Mountains to map timberland for a private company. At first, everything felt like another routine job, but the woods went silent. Strange footprints appeared near their camps. Stones were stacked in deliberate patterns, and at night, something heavy walked slow circles outside the firelight. Soon, they realized those ridges weren't empty. They had crossed into land that already belonged to something else. So, before we continue, please make sure to leave a like and let us know where you're watching from. Thanks. Remember the year, as clear as the ink on this page. It was 1886, and the mountains still felt older than any name we gave them. I was 23 then, hired on as a surveyor's helper for a timber company out of Knoxville. They sent us east into a stretch of the Appalachian that didn't appear on the neat company maps. The men in the office called it an unclaimed opportunity. The people who actually lived near it called it something else. There were 6 of us when we set out from the last proper town. Mr. Hale was our surveyor and leader, a careful man with a thin beard and a pocket watch. He checked more than the compass. Elijah was our guide, a thin mountaineer with gray in his beard and lines around his eyes from years squinting through woods. 2 laborers, Brody and Samuel, walked behind the mules and carried most of the supplies. Jonah, our cook, handled the food and cursed at everything, even the weather. I brought the notebooks, helped with the instruments, and tried not to show how green I felt. We left the town before dawn. The air smelled of cold smoke and damp dirt, and the last street lanterns gave off a weak glow that did little against the morning chill. People watched us from windows, but didn't come out to see us off. Only an old woman met us at the edge of the main road. She wore a dark shawl and leaned on a stick that looked heavier than she was. "You keep out of the high hollers," she told Elijah, not looking at the rest of us. "You know the places I mean. You know who walks up there." Elijah's jaw tightened. "We're following the ridgeline. Martha, companies pay good money. We'll be back before the snow sits. Those that go past the 3rd ridge don't always come back," she said. "Not whole, anyhow. The tall ones don't care about your money." I shifted my weight and looked away. I had heard talk in the tavern the night before. Stories about giants in the timber. A ridgewalker that watched from the tree line and took livestock. Some said it was a wild man. Some said a spirit. Some swore it was only bears and nonsense. I had grown up with tales like that and thought I knew them for what they were. Old stories that kept children from wandering too far. Mr. Hale pressed 2 fingers to his hat brim. "We appreciate the concern, ma'am. We're equipped for bears." She didn't answer him. She kept her gaze on Elijah until he nodded once, short and tight, as if agreeing to something unspoken. Only then did she step aside and let us pass. The road turned to rutted track before noon, and then to a narrow path that barely held the mules. The trees pressed closer, tall trunks rising in tight ranks, their branches locking out most of the sky. Fallen leaves lay deep and damp underfoot. Our boots sank and slid on the slope, and the pack animals snorted and tossed their heads. "Feels close in here," Jonah muttered behind me, shifting his sack on his shoulder. "Like the trees are listening." "Trees don't listen," Samuel said. He was broad-shouldered and quiet, and this was the longest sentence I had heard from him since we left town. "They just stand. They stand and hide things," Brody added. He had a crooked nose and a nervous laugh that came out at the wrong times. "Got an uncle lost up in these parts. Never found so much as a boot. Bears don't clean a man that clean. Reckon he just walked off the earth." "That's enough," Mr. Hale said from the front. "We have work to do." "Elijah, how far is the first ridgeline?" 3 hours steady," Elijah answered without turning. His voice carried back along the path. "Longer if the mules keep stumbling." I watched the guide as we walked. He moved with an ease none of us matched, picking his steps without looking down. Every now and then, his head turned. Not much, just enough for his eyes to sweep the trees to one side, then the other. The gesture was small, but it happened often. It stayed in my mind. By midday the air grew cooler, though the climb had sweat running under my shirt. We stopped in a narrow hollow to rest the animals. The hollow was quiet in a way that unsettled me. No bird calls, no insect buzz, only the sound of our own movements and the slow clink of tack. "Do you hear that?" I asked, though there was nothing to hear. Jonah gave me a tired look. "I don't hear a damn thing." "That's what I mean," I said. Elijah squatted near a patch of mud where a trickle of water seeped from under a rock. He brushed aside the leaves and frowned. "Tracks here," he said. We gathered around him. In the mud lay a print that had spread with the moisture, but still held a clear outline. It was broad and long, longer than my boot by several inches. 5 blunt marks showed at the front where toes would be. It looked too wide for a man's print, and too long for any bear I had seen. "Bear," Mr. Hale said at once. "Nothing more." "Bears don't step flat like that," Elijah answered in a low tone. He pushed his finger into the mud along the heel. "Weight's wrong, and there's no claw marks." "Could the mud have blurred them?" I said, more to steady my own thoughts than from any conviction. Elijah looked at me for a moment. His eyes were a washed-out blue. "Could be," he said, though his voice held no agreement. Brody backed away from the track. "Whatever is made has a big foot on it," he muttered. "Bigger than any man." Samuel snorted once, but he didn't offer another answer. Mr. Hale straightened. "We note it and move on. Our task is to mark timber and map the ridges. Bears or no bears, the company still wants their lines." I wrote a brief note in my book because that was my role. One broad track in a wet hollow, about 11 inches long. No visible claws. The words looked thin on the page. They didn't match the feeling in my stomach. We climbed again after that. The trees grew denser and the light took on a dull, even tone, as if the day stayed at 1 hour and would not change. The ridgeline came up under our feet in a slow, steady rise. By late afternoon, we reached a narrow clearing where the trees thinned enough to give us a view. From that spot, we could see waves of forested hills rolling away in every direction. No roads, no smoke from cabins, no signs of other people, just ridges and hollows and darker patches where the trees grew thicker. "There," Mr. Hale said, pointing with his folded map toward the east. "Second ridge, third ridge, then the plateau on the far side. That's the section they're interested in. Plenty of hardwood if these lines are right. Folks don't settle there for a reason," Elijah said quietly. "Because no road has been cut yet," Mr. Hale replied. "That's why we're here." We made camp just below the crest of the ridge in a small level spot among the roots of a great oak. The men pitched to canvas tents, one for Mr. Hale and me, the other for the rest. Jonah set a small fire in a ring of stones and boiled coffee that tasted of smoke and grit. We ate salt pork and hard bread and beans that hadn't fully softened. As the light faded, the forest grew even more silent. The fire threw a weak glow that stopped short against the trunks. The darkness beyond it felt dense and close. Every now and then, a branch would creak somewhere high above us, or something would drop into the undergrowth with a soft thump. Each sound drew our eyes. "Not much singing from the birds here," Jonah said, staring into his tin cup. "They know to keep quiet," Elijah replied. He sat near the edge of the firelight, his back to a tree, his rifle across his knees. "From what?" I asked. He glanced at me. "From what lives here," he said. "Some places belong to men, some don't. These ridges never did." Brody pulled his blanket tighter around his shoulders and forced a laugh. "You mean Martha's tall man, the ridge walker? Though you didn't put stock in stories, Elijah." "I put stock in tracks," Elijah said, "and in what I've seen." The fire crackled. A spark jumped and died. I waited for him to say more, but he fell quiet. The others looked at him in the way men do when they want to hear more, but are afraid of what the answer will be. We turned in early. The day's climb had worn me down, and the thin bedroll on the cold ground felt almost welcome. Mr. Hale blew out the lantern in our tent, and darkness settled over us. The canvas walls did nothing against the sounds outside. At first there was only the wind slipping through branches. Then, sometime later, I woke to a different noise. It was faint, measured, and heavy. A soft, steady thud that seemed to move around the edge of the camp. Footsteps. I held my breath and listened. The steps didn't hurry. They circled. Every few moments there was a pause, as if the thing that made them had stopped to listen back. I turned my head. I could just make out Mr. Hale's shape on the other bed. His breathing was slow and even. If he heard the sound, he didn't show it. The hair on my arm stood up. I told myself it was a deer or a wandering cow that had somehow strayed this far uphill. The weight in those steps didn't match that thought. The ground seemed to feel each one. The footsteps stopped behind our tent. The canvas didn't move. Nothing brushed against it. There was only a stillness that pressed on my ears. Then from the far side of the camp, I heard Elijah's voice. It was low but firm. "Keep walking," he called into the dark. "You're not welcome in this fire's light." The silence that followed felt thick. Then the footsteps started again, moving away through the trees, slow, steady, unhurried, until they faded into the night. I lay awake for a long time after that, staring into the dark and listening to my own heart. I didn't sleep again until the first grey light showed through the seam of the tent dot. I woke up with my jaw tight and a sore neck. The coals in the ring were dull and ringed with ash. No one spoke for a while. We ate quickly and packed in a quiet way that had nothing to do with sleep. Elijah walked a circle beyond the camp before we moved out. He kept his eyes on the ground and the low plants. When he came back, he didn't look at Mr. Hale first. He looked at me. "Tracks on the far side," he said. "Fresh, 2 sets. One larger, one smaller." Mr. Hale folded his map. "Bear and cub," he said. Elijah shook his head. "No claws in the prints. The stride is long, heel to toe." Brody rubbed at his nose and stared at the trees. Samuel checked the lashings on the packs and gave one of the mules a firm pat. Jonah held the coffee pot and didn't drink. The smell turned my stomach. We climbed to the next ridge. The path narrowed to a ledge no wider than a table in some places. Loose stones rolled under our boots. The mules balked and snorted. Elijah went first and kept his steps steady so the animals would follow. I watched his shoulders. He didn't slow around midday. We reached a saddle between 2 rises. A line of spruce marked the low point. In their shadow, we found a strange thing. 5 stones stacked beside the path, each placed flat, decreasing in size from the bottom to the top. They were not balanced by accident. Someone had carried them there. A tuft of coarse hair was wedged under the top stone. It was dark and long and kinked in a way that made my skin crawl. "Hunters mark trails," Mr. Hale said. He spoke in a voice that was meant to settle us, or children pass the time. Elijah took the hair and rolled it between his fingers. "This didn't come off the coat," he said. He pocketed it without another word. We moved on. The forest changed along the slope. We passed trees with bark stripped in long vertical bands, higher than a man could reach. We found a log half lifted and set crooked against another trunk, forming a narrow opening that smelled of musk and wet dirt. The air carried a sour odor that none of us named. The day grew warm. My shirt stuck to my back. The sound of our steps merged with the rattle of the pack harness. I kept my eyes low, then high, then low again, never finding comfort. When we stopped to drink at a shallow creek, I took out my notebook and wrote brief notes, because that was my habit when I didn't know what else to do. I sketched the stacked stones, the stripped bark, and the lifted log. My hand shook enough to make the lines crooked. "Don't put stories on paper," Jonah said, watching me. "Makes them stay." "I'm writing what I see," I said. "What you see is trouble," he answered. Brody had wandered a few paces upstream. He crouched by the bank and called out before anyone else noticed he had gone. "Here," he said in a tight voice. "This isn't right." We joined him. In the grit, at the edge of the water, lay more prints. They came down from the trees, crossed the trickle, and climbed up the far side. The stride was long. The heel showed deep. In one of the steps, a single toe mark held. A nick, as if the nail had split and pressed a notch into the mud. Mr. Hale stared at the creek and pressed his lips together. "We are losing time," he said. "We reach the 3rd ridge by dusk if we want to stay on schedule." "Schedule," Jonah repeated under his breath. He stood and swung his pack up again. As we climbed away from the stream, the woods grew quiet again in that same heavy way. The only sound was the wet drag of our boots and the animal breath of the mules. Every once in a while, a branch would make a dry snap somewhere at our backs. When we stopped, the next sound came after a pause, as if something had also stopped and then decided to move. Elijah lifted a hand and held it. We froze. He pointed toward a slope of ferns. I followed his finger. At first, I saw nothing but green fronds and dark trunks. Then, one of the shadows shifted. Not wind. A shape moved uphill, steady and controlled, keeping trees between us and itself. I couldn't make out more than a suggestion of arms and a thick torso. It didn't run. It paced us bear, Mr. Hale said again, but softer. Samuel adjusted his grip on the lead rope. "That's no bear," he said. It was the first time I had heard fear in his voice. We started again. The shape kept pace. We quickened. It stayed with us just out of full view. When the path turned hard to the right, around a rock face, a stone the size of my fist struck the trail ahead and bounced into the brush. It had come from our left, from the brush where the shape had been. Brody flinched and stumbled. "They're throwing," he said. "Hell, no sudden moves," Elijah said. "Keep walking." We rounded the bend. The shape didn't follow across the rock face. For a brief time, we saw only open slopes and trees. The air felt thinner there, as if the world had made more room. Then the path sank back under cover, and the sense of being watched returned. In the late afternoon, we reached the second ridge. The trees were older here. Their roots crossed the earth like thick ropes. We found another cleared patch, no larger than our last camp, with a rotted fire circle that looked old. A few charred sticks lay in it. No one had camped here in recent seasons. "We hold here," Mr. Hale said. "We need daylight to pick a safe line down into the next hollow." Elijah nodded. He didn't argue. That worried me more than anything else that day. We set the tents again. Jonah lit the fire. The smoke drifted straight up. The mules stood with their heads low and their ears turning. Samuel checked the animals twice without being asked. Brody sat with his back against a stump and kept his rifle across his knees. He didn't try to hide the shake in his hands. As we ate, a call carried through the trees. It was not the long rising note of a coyote. It was shorter and deeper and ended in a flat, heavy sound. It came once, then from far off to our right, another answered with a pattern that matched but a different pitch. They didn't sound like any animal I knew. Jonah put his spoon down. "That's people," he whispered. Elijah shook his head. "Not our kind." Mr. Hale stood. "No chances. Fire bright. Stay close." Night came down quickly under the high branches. The circle of light felt small. The call sounded again, closer. Then a click from the dark, like a tongue on a mouth. Another on the other side. I thought of the old woman at the town line and the way she had looked at Elijah without blinking. I wondered what she would say now. A rock hit the outer edge of the fire circle and rolled toward the ashes. Embers jumped and died. Another struck the side of a tent and slid down the canvas. We raised our rifles. Elijah didn't raise him. He stood and called out in a steady voice. "We don't mean harm," he said. "We pass through. We leave at first light." Silence. I felt the hairs rise on my arms again. I forced my hands to lower the barrel of my rifle the way Elijah had done. Mr. Hale didn't lower his. He kept it up, eyes in the dark. Something moved at the edge of the light. Then a tall shape stepped between two trunks and stood. I could see the outline of shoulders and a head above them. The arms hung down past where a man would stop. The chest moved with slow breaths. The face stayed in shadow. It didn't flinch at the fire. It didn't step closer. Brody made a small sound in his throat. Jonah's teeth clicked. Samuel whispered a prayer I didn't recognize. My own thoughts went blank, then narrowed to the simple facts. There were 6 of us. It was one. That didn't comfort me. Elijah lifted one hand, palm out. The shape tilted its head as if considering him. Then it turned without hurry and moved away. The steps were heavy but measured. When it was gone, the woods closed around the camp again, with that same pressure in the ears. We didn't speak for a long time. When we did, it was in short bursts. It saw our number, Mr. Hale said. He tried to sound calm and succeeded for a few words. It chose not to engage. "This is posturing. They harvest acorns along the ridge," Elijah said. "We camped in the path. We move at dawn. We leave no scraps." "What are they?" Brody asked. Elijah stared into the dark as if waiting for the next sound. "Some say they're people who left people," he said. "Some say they were here first. I don't know. I only know they protect places where they feed and raise young." Mr. Hale set his rifle on his bedroll. "We're not here to test them," he said. "We're here to work. We set the line tomorrow and finish the ridge count by noon. Then we head back." Elijah turned his head. "You want to go forward? Our route back is the same path that brought us here." Mr. Hale said, "They already know that way. I prefer fresh ground and speed." We drop into the next hollow and cross to the third ridge. It's a straight line to the plateau. 2 days out on the far side puts us near a river that points toward settlement. Elijah looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Then we need to keep our fire small. No scraps, no latrine near the water, and no looking them in the eyes if they step close. That reads as a threat." "Everything reads as a threat," Jonah muttered. "We breathe and it reads as a threat." I lay down later with my boots close by and the rifle across them. I didn't close my eyes right away. The night sounds came and went in patterns that didn't make sense to me. Short knocks like wood on wood, a whistle that rose and broke, then nothing for a long stretch, as if the woods held its breath. Sometime after midnight, I woke to a smell like wet fur and earth near the tent wall. Fabric brushed against a shape outside, not a hand, a forearm, Maybe. It slid along the canvas and paused near my head. I didn't speak. I didn't move. The weight of it pressed a shallow line into the fabric. It stayed for several heartbeats. Then it lifted, and I heard the heavy steps again as they faded into the trees. When morning came, Mr. Hale pointed out that nothing in the camp had been broken or stolen. He used that fact like a tool to shape our fear into something manageable. We packed. We cleaned the fire circle until it looked unused. Elijah smoothed the ground where the prince had come near. He took the tuft of hair out of his pocket, looked at it, and tucked it deeper. We started down off the ridge toward the next hollow. The slope was steeper than the last descent. The earth was wet and slick with leaves. The mules slid and planted their hooves with effort. We kept space between us. No one joked. No one told a story to fill the silence. By mid-morning, we reached a narrow draw where a small stream cut through mossy rock. Bones lay scattered on the flat beside the water. Deer, from the look of them, the joints were pulled apart cleanly. The skull sat upright, as if set in place after the work was done. I counted 3 sets, maybe taken at different times. The sight had a tidy order that made my mouth dry. Samuel bent and set the skull gently on its side. "They don't waste," he said in a low voice. Elijah nodded. "They keep the marrow for winter," he said. "We move." We crossed the draw and started up the next rise. The calls began again, closer this time, one to our left, then another ahead. The pattern was different now, shorter, urgent. We pressed on, and with each switchback, a call answered another call. The hair on the back of my neck rose on its own. I shut my notebook and didn't open it again that hour. Near the top, a low structure came into view between the trees. It was made of limbs woven together and wedged against a fallen trunk. Fresh sap showed on some cuts. A strip of cloth hung from a branch. It was a canvas, a corner of a pack cover, torn. The edge was frayed and darkened with dirt. The canvas matched the weave from our company supply lot. Elijah touched the cloth and looked at us one by one. Others came through. He said, "Not long ago, where are they now?" Brody asked. "Don't." No one answered. A stone rolled somewhere above us, then another. We all looked up. The slope above the structure was bare of undergrowth for a short stretch. Something moved along that edge. Not one shape this time. 2. One larger, one smaller, stepping in a line that matched the prints Elijah had seen near our first camp. "We keep moving," Mr. Hale said. He said it with certainty he didn't feel. We pushed higher. The path bent toward a narrow notch between 2 boulders. As we neared it, a log crashed down on the trail behind us with a thud that shook loose dirt. It was not an accident. It had been rolled from above to block the way we had come. The mules started and reared. Samuel and Jonah fought to hold them. Brody slipped and went to his knees. I grabbed his arm and pulled him up. "They're driving us," Elijah said. He said it plainly. "They want us over the notch." "Then we go," Mr. Hale said. He didn't look back. He didn't let us see his hands shake. He pushed through the notch and onto the narrow shelf beyond. We followed in a single line with no room to turn around. The shelf ran along a drop that went far enough down to end a life. On the far end, the ledge turned sharply into a stand of laurel and thicker cover. I fixed my eyes on that point and set each foot where Elijah set his. Halfway across, a low rumble started somewhere below us. It was not thunder. It was a deep roll like heavy stones shifting. A small slide spilled down and across the slope beneath the shelf. Dust rose and hung in the air. I tasted grit. The sound stopped as quickly as it had started. I took one slow breath and placed my boot again. When we reached the far end, Elijah stepped into the laurel and raised his hand in a stop. I squeezed in behind him. Through the leaves, I saw an opening in the brush, a bowl-shaped hollow beyond, and a cluster of shapes moving in it. Tall, dark, and quiet. More than 2. I counted 3 on the near side, and shapes beyond that I couldn't number. They hadn't been driving us away. They had been driving us toward this. We backed into the laurel slowly. No one spoke. Samuel held the mules still by their lead ropes, but even they seemed to understand this was not a normal danger. Their chests rose fast, and their ears twitched without rhythm. I felt sweat cold on my back, even though the air was heavy. The shapes in the hollow moved with steady purpose, picking through fallen limbs and stones in a pattern I didn't understand. It didn't look random. It looked like an activity with a procedure. The smaller shapes stayed closer to the bigger ones. They carried short branches and placed them in small piles, as if sorting. One of the larger ones leaned down and cracked open a log with its hands. It pulled something out and passed it to the smaller one beside it. "We cannot cross through that," Mr. Hale whispered. "They don't want us to leave," Brody whispered back. His voice trembled. "We hold here until they move," Elijah said. "If we turn back, that path is gone. We cannot climb out the way we came. We wait for a window." "Window," Jonah said under his breath. "That looks like a family. They're working. They're not going anywhere." "Families feed," Elijah said. "Families defend." That word made me think of the bones we saw earlier at the drawer. I felt sick. My mind wanted to latch onto something simple. A number, a direction, a tool, anything. My notebook stuck to the inside of my coat. I reached for it on instinct, then stopped. Elijah caught the small motion and shook his head once. I lowered my hand. Mr. Hale closed his eyes for a moment. I saw him repeat the problem to himself in silence. Our line cut through the wilderness. Our retreat was blocked. Our only path was forward, but forward meant entering a place we should not have entered. "We go around the bowl," he said. "Wide arc, no sound, no fire today." We cut north and regained the ridgeline further ahead. "They'll hear the mules," Elijah said. "Their steps we cover their hooves with sackcloth." Hale answered. We moved slowly. No one argued. It was a plan that felt desperate, but not suicidal. Samuel tore strips of canvas from an old grain sack and tied them around the mule's hooves. The animals didn't like it, but they tolerated it after a moment of stamping. The sound dulled by half, not silent, but softer. We moved off the ledge and into thicker timber on the northern slope. The brush clung to our legs, branches scratched at our sleeves. Every step felt louder than it should have. I counted my breaths between each footfall. Samuel led the animals in the middle, so the rest of us formed a dull perimeter. We advanced along the incline in a shallow diagonal. After 20 minutes, Elijah raised a hand for stillness. We froze again. From the hollow behind us came a single call, short, hard, followed by two lower calls, spaced wide. The working shapes had noticed something. I looked back through a gap between trunks and saw the tallest shape stand fully straight. Its head turned toward the ridgeline we had left. It stared up the slope. It didn't look our way, not yet. We moved faster, but kept the same careful steps. I forced my gaze ahead. The forest became a world of trunks and shadow, so uniform that direction felt uncertain. Only Elijah's calm forward movement kept me anchored to a meaning for forward. I stopped thinking about schedules or maps. I didn't think about the third ridge or the plateau. I only thought of getting out of this bowl alive. Near midday, we reached a line of boulders crusted with pale moss. Elijah signaled we rest in the shadow of one of them. The animals drank from our canteens quietly. Jonah cut small strips of pork and passed them around without comment. We ate in silence. Each bite was taken slowly so the sound didn't carry. "We need to go higher," Elijah said. "The plateau on this side is closer to the north rim than Hale marked. The company maps are optimistic." Hale said nothing to defend the maps. He sat with his back pressed to the stone and stared at the ground. He looked older in that moment, not defeated, but stripped down. "We keep north and climb near the choke point between the twin spurs," he said. His voice steadied again. "We have to reach open ground before dusk. If we are trapped in cover when nightfall comes, we won't hold them off." Brody nodded fast. He wanted orders, any orders that we started up again. The terrain sharpened, roots tangled thicker, and the slope forced us to lean forward. Sweat soaked through my shirt again, but the air didn't feel as warm anymore. The higher we climbed, the cooler the wind felt. A good sign. Open ground always held more wind. We had covered about another half-mile when the first scream tore through the woods. It was not human. It was not the blunt call from the night before. This was sharp, long, full of breath. It carried pain or anger, hard to tell which. We stopped dead. Then, another answered from close behind us on the lower slope. This one sounded closer than any call yet. They found our trail, Elijah said. Samuel drew his knife and kept his other hand on the mule rope. His jaw tightened. Jonah's lips moved in a silent prayer. Brody held his rifle close to his chest with both hands like he wanted to hide behind it. "We keep moving," Hale said. "No panic." We pushed upward. The calls began to alternate quickly, high, then low, 2 directions. They were coordinating. They knew where we were. They were closing in. The brush thickened again and slowed us. Branches snagged on gear. Laurel scraped our sleeves and faces. The forest felt like a maze tightening. I heard a branch snap behind us, not small, thick. Samuel turned sharply with the lead rope and the mules balked. Hale hissed for movement, but the animals refused to step. Then, just behind the line of trees below, a large shape moved through the brush. It was not fully visible, but its height was plain. It was at least 6.5 feet tall, maybe more. Broad shoulders, thick arms, covered in dark hair. It moved with confidence. It didn't rush. It stalked me, Elijah said. Now, the animal surged forward in panic and nearly tore the rope from Samuel's hand. We pressed through the brush toward a patch of large stones. The calls behind us quickened. Another branch broke. Something moved parallel to us higher up the slope. Not one creature, two. They flanked. We need elevation, Hale said. We need open rock. We reached the stones. They formed a natural staircase. We scrambled up them as fast as the mules could navigate. One slipped and scraped its flank, but kept going. My lungs burned. The forest behind us grew louder with heavy footfalls and calls. As we crested the stones, the trees thinned. The wind hit my face. Real wind, free wind. The sky opened overhead. For a brief moment, I felt hope again. Then we saw what lay ahead on the plateau. 3 tall shapes stood near the center of it, standing, watching. One was far larger than the others, taller than any figure we had seen so far, shoulders like carved stone, chest broad enough to hold the weight of years. It looked like the elder of the ridge. They had expected us to come this way. They had driven us with precision. Hale stopped dead. Elijah brought his rifle up slowly, but didn't aim it. We all froze in place, locked between 2 forces, the ones behind us and the ones ahead. In that suspended moment, the wind carried the scent of earth and musk and something that felt old in a way. History books don't record. The elder shape stepped forward, one slow step, its eyes fixed on Elijah first, then Hale, then me. We were no longer explorers. We were no longer surveyors. We were trespassers standing in a place where our kind had no claim, and they knew we had no path left but through them. The elder shape raised one arm, not fast, not aggressive, just a steady lift of its limb, as if establishing order among the others. The 2 shapes beside it lowered their heads slightly. Their posture changed. They were not rushing us. They were not charging. They were blocking. No one spoke. I heard nothing except the wind and my own breath. I looked at Elijah. His face was calm but pale. He lowered his rifle a fraction so the barrel pointed at the ground instead of forward. The elder watched that motion. I saw recognition in the stillness of its frame. I cannot explain how, but the creature understood gestures. This gave just enough room for us to think. Hale slowly reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his folded map. He held it openly in both hands so the shapes could see he was not grabbing a weapon. He unfolded it once and held it at chest height, like he was offering the intention behind the ink that we wanted to see. To measure, not take. He spoke quietly. We will leave. We will not mark this land. We will never return. The elder lowered its arm. Behind us, there was movement again on the slope. 2 more shapes appeared between the trees. We were surrounded on both sides now. There was no trick of direction left. They had drawn the circle around us tight. Elijah, Hale whispered, "Tell me what to do." Elijah stared at the elder for a long time. His jaw worked as he swallowed. Then he turned his head slightly so we could hear him. But he didn't break eye contact with the creature. "Everyone kneel," he said. "Set your rifles down on the ground in front of you. Palms open, eyes down." Brody's breath caught. What if kneeling is submission? What if that's what they wanted? Elijah answered without looking away. Then submission gets us out alive. Standing gets us ripped apart. Hale nodded once. He knelt. I knelt. Jonah and Samuel followed. Brody hesitated for the smallest beat, then dropped as well. Elijah went down last, steady and controlled. We set our rifles down. I held my palms open in the air in front of me. The wind cut across the plateau again. The elder stepped closer by 2 slow paces. It towered above us now, close enough that I could see the thickness of its forearms. The dark hair, gray streaks through parts of it. The shape held a presence that felt far older than human age. The elder leaned down slightly, as if inspecting us. Then, behind its massive left arm, something small moved. A child. The smaller one we had glimpsed earlier took a step from behind. It reached its hand out toward Elijah's boot. It made a soft, chuffing noise. Curious, not hostile. Elijah didn't move. The elder shifted its weight and blocked the young one gently with an arm. Then it turned its head toward the north ridge, away from where we had come, and made one short call. It was not loud. It was an instruction. The shapes behind us on the slope reacted first. They turned, they withdrew. No rustle of panic, no rush. They simply disappeared into the shadows, one by one. The two shapes flanking the elders stepped back. They turned their bodies slowly toward the same direction the elder had indicated. They were making a corridor. They were directing us north across the plateau. It was a warning and a mercy at the same time. Elijah lifted his chin once, subtle, controlled. Then he rose to his feet slowly. We followed. We didn't lift rifles. We didn't look directly at the elder's eyes. We only backed away and turned toward the northern rim where the wind rolled strongest. We walked past them. I remember the sound of my boots on stone. I remember the tremble under my ribs. I remember the exact moment when the elder stopped watching us and turned back toward the hollow we had been forced from. The young one followed close behind it, glancing once in my direction before it vanished into the brush. When we reached the far edge of the plateau, the ground fell away into a steep descent. We didn't speak until the timber swallowed us again and the shapes were gone. Hale leaned against a trunk and exhaled. "We cut due north," he said. His voice was shaking now. "No camp tonight, unless the terrain forces us. We keep our distance. We keep moving until we find water and a path east. I want to hit a river by tomorrow evening." None of us challenged that. We descended the far side of the plateau. The air grew colder and the wind carried in from the east. Now, the terrain shifted into rockier soil, with patches of thorn and more sparse timber. I checked my watch instinctively, even though the sun angle told me enough. The afternoon was still young. We had hours of light left. As we moved, I found myself unable to shake one thought that kept circling in my head. Those creatures were not raging, reckless beasts. They had orders. They were young. They showed restraint when they could have slaughtered us beneath the ridge without effort. They controlled the encounter from the start. We crossed out of their claimed ground because they allowed it. The next few hours passed in tense silence. Every twig break made us freeze. Every gust of wind that carried a strange scent made us clutch at our rifles without lifting them fully. Elijah took point again. His pace had changed. He was no longer marking the survey route. He was marking exit and nothing else. As dusk approached, we found the faint trace of a game trail pointing toward the lower country. The wind here carried the smell of river water, faint but present. Elijah stopped and listened. No calls, no stones, no heavy pacing footfalls behind us. The forest here felt different, not safe, but clear of that heavy pressure that weighed on the ridges behind us. Hale finally spoke. "We survived the plateau," he said quietly. "Tomorrow morning we will follow the river east. Then we returned to Knoxville, and then we never speak a word of what we saw to the company." Brody gave a strained laugh. "You'd think they'd believe us anyway." "No," Hale said. "But if any of us tries to document this terrain again, they'll send more men, then more, and eventually someone won't make it out." We set camp near a fallen pine, tiny fire, no words beyond the necessities. My hand still trembled when I wrote the bare minimum coordinates and route direction in the book. Every scratch of graphite felt loud. Before I lay down, I asked Elijah one question. Why did they spare us? He stared at the thin line of flame and answered without looking at me, "Because we gave them room to choose mercy." His voice held no comfort, and the truth was, under that sky, surrounded by those dark slopes and the distant roar of mountain wind, the idea sank deep that we had only survived because the elder decided our presence was not yet a threat worth eliminating. That night, sleep came in brief, shallow bursts. Each time I woke, I expected to hear them again, but there was nothing but the sound of wind and the faint movement of water somewhere below. We left at first light. The next morning, we didn't look back. The ground sloped steadily downward for most of that morning, and with each 100 steps we took, the air felt less thick and the silence less heavy. Still, nobody talked unless the words were necessary. Our minds were on getting home. Our bodies moved like we were still hunted because the fear had sunk deep and stayed there. Around midday, we reached the river. It wasn't large, but it cut through a shallow ravine with clear, moving water. Elijah knelt at the edge and felt the current with his hand. "This will take us east," he said. "Keep it on our right." We walked the bank until the valley opens and find a flatter course. We followed the riverbank, careful to avoid deep mud. The trees thinned out and the world felt wider again. The further we walked, the more I realized none of us had fully processed what happened. We were alive, but something about walking out of that territory made me feel like the mountains themselves still watched from behind. We camped early that night because the riverbank widened into flat ground. We wanted daylight to set up. The river drowned out distant sounds and the air smelled cleaner here. Still, we made a very small fire, barely enough to warm our hands. No one wanted to draw attention to ourselves, even out here. That night, Hale gathered us near the fire. "We say nothing about them," he said. "Not to the company, not to our families, not to anyone." His eyes looked lighter in the fire glow, but his voice was colder. "No good comes from men going back into a place not meant for us." No one disagreed, but then Jonah asked something I think we were all thinking. "Why do you think there's none of their kind near towns? Why stay so deep in ridge country?" Elijah answered, and the heaviness in his voice made my chest tight. "Because they know what we'd do if we found them in numbers where timber buyers could reach. They've watched us longer than we've watched them." And that line carved itself into my memory. It made the world feel reversed. Like everything we assumed about wild places was naive. We stayed quiet after that, and tried to sleep early. I woke up sometime after midnight because of a soft splash in the river. I sat up slowly and reached for my rifle. The moon hung low, but bright enough that I could see the water glint. At first, I thought it was an animal drinking at the far bank, but then I saw a shape rise slightly above the river surface, tall, and then move back toward the tree line opposite us. I waited to hear noise, a call, a branch snap. Nothing followed. Minutes stretched, then a second splash upstream. Another shape. Could have been deer, could have been anything. My stomach turned at the idea that maybe we hadn't made it out of their watch at all. Maybe we had just stepped into another part of their range. I lay back down and barely slept again. Morning came, and the river guided us another long stretch east. Trees thinned more. We saw signs of older clearings from settlers decades back. Rotting fence posts half fallen and eaten by moss. Then, mid-afternoon, Samuel pointed out thin smoke through the trees ahead, and Elijah's shoulders eased as soon as he saw it. Civilization. A few hours later, we reached a small trading post on the river bend. A man with a bowler hat and suspenders watched us drag into the clearing. His face changed when he saw the state of us. Clothes torn from laurel, filth on every part of us, deep exhaustion in all our expressions. "Where'd you boys come out of?" he asked. Hale didn't give details. "We came off the high ridges. The timber company sent us. We're heading back to Knoxville. I need shelter and supplies." The trader's face shifted slightly when his eyes flicked over our gear. "You came from the North Hollows?" he asked slowly. "Near enough," Elijah answered. The man nodded. He didn't ask more. He pointed to a structure beside the post. "Beds in there. You can pay tomorrow." That night, all of us slept on real cots for the first time in days. Solid wood walls around us, roof above us, no shifting shadows between trunks. But even with that comfort, I woke more than once because my body expected movement in the dark. For months after, I would wake the same way. The next morning, the trader served us breakfast. He asked again which hollow we cut through, and Elijah only said, "North Third Ridge." The trader's expression told me he understood enough. "You're lucky," he said. "Most folks don't come from that run without trouble." Hale shot him a sharp look. "What trouble?" The trader shrugged and pretended to focus on the skillet. "Folks disappear sometimes. Hunters, trappers, surveyors, always up that way. Some say there's something up there that doesn't care for man." Nobody responded. We ate in silence. We paid the man and followed the river road until we hit a wagon route. 3 days later, we reached Knoxville. The company barely cared about what happened. Hale told them the terrain was too unstable, not worth development. He turned in a half-complete map showing broken ridges, poor soil, and bad timber density. They chalked it up to poor resource potential. The company never sent another crew that direction as far as we ever learned, but we all separated after that, slowly, over the weeks and months. Jonah left Knoxville entirely. Samuel found work on farms closer to home. Brody started working stockyards and refused to travel outside settled counties again. Hale returned to survey work, but never again in mountain country. When I ran into him months later, he seemed to have recovered on the surface, but his hands still shook ever so slightly when he thought no one was watching. Elijah disappeared back into the ridges he came from, but not those ridges. He would never go near that part of the Appalachian again. As for me, I only told this story because I am now old and days ahead of me are fewer than those behind. I stayed quiet because I knew no one would believe me, but I also stayed quiet because I never wanted men with greed in their eyes to decide those creatures needed to be studied or hunted or caged. Some places are not ours to measure. Some things know we don't belong there and choose whether we return alive. I still remember that elder on the plateau, the way it chose restraint instead of violence, the way it kept its young one shielded from us. It let us leave. We only survived because they chose mercy.